He died with a smile on his face, not because he was at peace but because he didn't know it was coming. The woman he betrayed for 46 years placed the coffee gently on his table, kissed his cheek and pulled the trigger. Twice. Silence followed, but it wasn't justice's silence. It was revelation's roar. Welcome to Through Crime, your portal into the most chilling true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and the darkest corners of criminal history. Don't forget to like, share and comment on this video, and if you are new here, do well to hit the subscribe button. We dig deep into the facts, uncover shocking twists, and explore the theories that keep investigators and the world on edge. Stay back and enjoy. In the sleepy town of Coral Gables, Florida, Margaret Delacroix was a name whispered with admiration. A woman of grace, elegance, and quiet strength. The only daughter of industrial magnate William Delacroix, Margaret was born into privilege, but it never tainted her heart. By 26, her life took a tragic turn. A rare uterine condition left her unable to conceive. She grieved alone, quietly packing away the nursery books and silencing the lullabies that would never be sung in her halls. For a while, she withdrew, convinced no man would accept a woman who couldn't bear children. Then came Leonard. He wasn't wealthy, but he was kind, stable, and full of promise. A man with an easy laugh and the kind of patience that felt holy. He told her that love had nothing to do with children, that he'd marry her for who she was, not for what she could give. He was her second chance at happiness. Or so she thought. They married 6 months after they met. Margaret's father was hesitant. Leonard Fisher was a high school math teacher with no substantial income. But Margaret was in love, and Leonard was all charm and quiet ambition. Over the years, Leonard transitioned into real estate, first flipping homes, then building luxury condos. With Margaret's financial backing and her father's quiet support, Leonard went from middle class to millionaire in a decade. They traveled the world, attended charity galas, hosted elaborate dinner parties in their Spanish-style mansion. To everyone else, they were a couple that proved love could outlast the heartbreak of infertility. But under that polished exterior, cracks ran deep, cracks no one could see, not yet. It began with an obituary. Margaret was reading the local newspaper when her eyes locked onto a familiar name, Fisher. A young man named Caleb Fisher had died in a car crash in Fort Myers, only 2 hours away. His father was listed as Leonard M. Fisher. The middle initial jolted her. The age of the boy, 27, twisted something in her chest. He would have been born right around the time Leonard was making his first big real estate deal. The same time he started working weekends away from home. She couldn't ignore it. She didn't want to believe it, but something was wrong. She hired a private investigator the next day. 2 weeks later, the truth shattered her life. Leonard had another wife, another family, a second home. A secret life in Fort Myers where he had been married to a woman named Danielle for over 4 decades, the same number of years he had been with Margaret. And he had 4 children. 4 children he raised, supported. While Margaret cried herself to sleep for years, blaming herself for their childlessness, Leonard had been living the life she always dreamed of, with someone else. Margaret said nothing at first. She couldn't. The rage was too loud, the betrayal too suffocating. She reviewed her will, transferred assets, made quiet moves behind closed doors. She wrote Leonard's children out of any inheritance by placing her holdings in a private trust, a clause he had never expected her to use. And then she waited. It was a Sunday. Leonard liked his coffee strong and his eggs soft. Margaret made both just like she had for 46 years. He was reading the paper when she walked up behind him, pressed the muzzle of a small pistol, her father's old revolver, against the base of his neck and pulled the trigger. The second shot was just to be sure. There was no scream. No confrontation. Just finality. When detectives arrived, Margaret was seated calmly in the garden, watering her begonias. "My husband is dead," she said plainly. "I killed him. But he murdered me first, just slower." At first it looked like a classic case of domestic homicide. An aging wife, no children, isolated, finally snapping under the pressure of loneliness. But as detectives dug deeper, Leonard's dual life came to light. The second marriage, the hidden children, the duplicate financial records. All carefully maintained for nearly half a century. Margaret wasn't the bitter wife. She was the victim of a master manipulator. Leonard had used her wealth to fund his empire, all while raising another family in secret. He had lied to 2 women, built 2 lives, and maintained the illusion with cold precision. Public opinion shifted. Margaret's face was no longer that of a killer, it was the face of justice served in the only language betrayal understands. Margaret's defense was built on betrayal trauma. A psychological fracture caused by prolonged emotional deception. Medical experts testified about the weight of grief and manipulation. She never denied the act. She accepted the consequences, but demanded the truth be heard. The jury listened. The prosecution wanted life. But the jury saw a different kind of crime, the one Leonard committed in silence year after year, turning a marriage into a con. She was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not murder. Sentenced to 8 years with eligibility for parole in 3. When asked what she planned to do with her freedom, Margaret said only, "Start over, this time with the truth. Love without honesty is just manipulation dressed in flowers." Margaret believed in forever. Leonard believed in leverage. She gave him her heart. He took her future. But in the end, justice came not with a gavel, but with a gun, a whisper, and a trembling finger on a trigger she never thought she'd pull. But just when it seemed the story had ended, a letter arrived at the prison addressed to Margaret. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed Leonard, holding a baby. The photo was dated last year. And scribbled on the back were 5 chilling words. "You only knew half of it." The image was grainy, taken at a distance. Leonard sat on a park bench, cradling a baby no older than 6 months. He wore sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. But it was him. Margaret would recognize that posture anywhere. The faint crook in his right shoulder, the way he bent slightly forward when holding something precious. She'd seen it only once before, the day he held her niece at her christening. What gutted her wasn't just the baby, it was the timestamp in the corner. 11 months before his death. Leonard had been 72 years old. Margaret's fingers trembled as she flipped the photo over. In a scribbled hand, barely legible, were 5 words. "You only knew half of it." The return address on the envelope had been smudged beyond recognition. No signature. No note. Just the photograph, and a dagger of new questions. Even behind bars, whispers traveled fast. Word of the mysterious photo spread through the prison. Not from Margaret, but from a guard who caught a glimpse and couldn't resist gossiping. Soon, a local journalist caught wind of the development. His name was Eli Parker, young, hungry, and obsessed with unraveling Florida's most talked about murder in recent history. He filed a request to interview Margaret. At first she declined. But after a week of sleepless nights and endless staring at the photograph, she agreed. "You believed you buried the lie," Eli said, eyes sharp. "But what if the lie had a child?" Margaret stared at him, hollowed out by exhaustion. "I knew Leonard had a second family," she whispered. "I didn't know he had a third." Eli's investigation took him deep into Fort Myers, into a web of aliases, off-the-record properties, and shell companies Leonard had set up over the past 2 decades. That's when they found her. Her name was Carla Vega, 31 years old, an aspiring artist. She had met Leonard Fisher, or rather Michael Langston, at an art fair in Tampa 10 years earlier. He had presented himself as a wealthy investor, recently divorced, and eager to help her build a gallery. They were never legally married, but they had a child, a son, born less than a year before Leonard was killed. Carla never knew about Margaret. She thought Leonard was a lonely but generous retiree who wanted a second chance at love. When she found out he died, she claimed someone in a black car had been watching her house for weeks, and after his death, she received a small untraceable deposit of $50,000. Hush money, perhaps. But why? Eli's research led to a stunning discovery. Leonard had funneled over $1.2 million in secret payments to Carla over 6 years, routed through offshore accounts linked to a construction company Margaret didn't even know she owned. That's when the Department of Justice got involved. It turned out Leonard hadn't just been a liar. He was under quiet investigation for real estate fraud, money laundering, and suspected racketeering, and Margaret's fortune had been the lifeblood of it all. The man she married wasn't just living a double life. He was living a criminal one. And Carla wasn't his only mistress. There were others. But none of them had what Margaret did: power, money, and motive. Margaret, once seen as a tragic widow-turned-murderer, was now viewed as the unknowing financier of Leonard's crimes. Her legal team filed a motion for retrial based on new evidence, not to overturn the conviction, but to reduce her sentence and clear her name in the fraud charges. The court ruled in her favor. Margaret's sentence was commuted. After serving only 22 months, she was released on parole. She walked out of prison not as a criminal, but as a woman who survived the ultimate betrayal. And with freedom came a new goal. She wanted custody of Leonard's final child. Carla Vega refused contact for weeks, until her lawyer informed her of the inheritance Leonard had left behind in secret for the baby. Margaret, now financially free from Leonard's chains but emotionally bound to the baby who bore her husband's blood, made a bold move. She filed for legal guardianship on the grounds that Carla was living in unsafe housing and had no steady income. It was a scandal. Talk shows ate it up. Social media exploded. Was this revenge? A publicity stunt? Or something deeper? Margaret spoke only once to the press. "I have no children of my own. This child is the last remnant of the man who deceived me. I don't want revenge. I want to do what's right." The court's decision? Pending. But the judge issued a temporary custody agreement granting Margaret supervised visits. Just when the dust seemed to settle, Eli Parker received an encrypted email from an unknown source. Inside was a voice recording. It was Leonard. The date stamp was from 2 months before his death. In the message, Leonard confessed to more than just the affairs. He admitted that he had been planning to leave Carla and flee the country with a woman named Roxanne, another name not yet uncovered. The reason? He feared Margaret was getting suspicious. He said, "She's smarter than she lets on. I think she knows. If she finds out, it's over." The recording ended with a sound, something metallic being loaded. A gun. Eli brought the recording to the authorities, but within 24 hours, his apartment was broken into. His laptop and backup drives were stolen. The only copy left was the one he sent to Margaret. The envelope it came in? Stamped with the same handwriting that sent the original photo. 5 new words were scribbled on the back. "Roxanne knows where he hid it." Roxanne wasn't in any of Leonard's known records. No photos. No financial ties. No mentions in his double life with Danielle, or his secret life with Carla. But Margaret remembered something. One night in 2016, Leonard had taken a call at 3 a.m. Margaret had awoken to the sound of him whispering, urgent but calm. When she asked who it was, he mumbled, "Just an old friend from Tampa. Roxy." Back then she thought nothing of it. Just a weird name in the middle of the night. Now she realized, it was the only name that had never reappeared in the public unraveling of his lies. Roxanne was hidden for a reason. And that meant she knew something no one else did. Eli Parker, the journalist, was relentless. After the break-in at his apartment and the theft of the voice recording, he began sleeping in motels, bouncing from city to city while continuing his investigation under the radar. It paid off. Through one of Leonard's offshore construction accounts, Eli traced a monthly payment made to a woman under the alias R. Monroe, sent to a P.O. box in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Eli staked out the mailbox. 3 days later, a woman in her mid-50s, sun-worn but sharply dressed, pulled up in a red Jeep Cherokee, checked the box, and drove off without noticing him. Her plates led to a small beach bungalow registered under Roxanne Monroe. Roxanne Monroe wasn't just Leonard's third or fourth affair. She was his partner in crime. Literally. A former financial analyst with a string of dismissed fraud charges from the early 2000s, Roxanne had helped Leonard hide the money, not just from Carla or Danielle but from Margaret. She was the architect behind the shell companies, the fake trusts, and the accounts that funneled millions from Margaret's name into off-grid holdings in Belize, the Caymans, and Switzerland. Roxanne had vanished right before Leonard's death. Until now. Margaret requested to meet Roxanne in person. Through Eli's negotiation and the leverage of the baby's inheritance, Roxanne agreed. They met at a private beach house under U.S. Marshal supervision. Margaret walked in composed. Roxanne was already there, sipping red wine like it was a Sunday brunch. "You must be the wife," she said. "I was the wife. You were the business." Roxanne laughed. "You were the funding. I was the vision." The meeting lasted 37 minutes. Margaret left with two things. A flash drive. A warning. "Leonard wasn't planning to run away from me," Roxanne said. "He was running from something much bigger. He stole from people, dangerous people." The flash drive contained access codes, offshore account numbers, transaction ledgers, and one encrypted document titled, Black River Contingency. Eli contacted a cybersecurity expert. The document was a list of bribes paid to city officials, judges, and a handful of names that shocked even Margaret. One of them was a federal prosecutor who had investigated Leonard's real estate dealings in 2004, and later dismissed the case. Another name? William Delacroix, her father. The man she thought was above reproach. According to the file, William had transferred $750,000 to a shell corporation connected to Leonard just before his sudden health collapse and death in 2007. Margaret's world shattered all over again. Was her father complicit in Leonard's schemes? Had Leonard used her father too? Or had they worked together? And worse, had her father known about the second family all along? With the documents, Eli and Margaret quietly approached the Department of Justice. A sealed investigation was launched. But before the case could move forward, Roxanne disappeared. Her Jeep was found abandoned near Alligator Alley. Inside was a single note. "You're next." Authorities feared she had been silenced by one of Leonard's former partners. Margaret, now fearing for her life, was placed under federal protection. But the real question still burned inside her. What exactly had Leonard stolen, and from whom? In the midst of chaos, one unexpected victory brought a sliver of light. The court awarded Margaret full guardianship of Leonard's youngest child, Daniel. Carla, weary of the threats, money trouble, and press, relinquished custody on one condition: that she be allowed to visit once a month. Margaret agreed. For the first time in 72 years, she held a baby that bore the blood of the man she both loved and hated. And something unexpected happened. She felt peace. Not closure, but purpose. "I didn't get the life I was promised," she told Eli. But maybe I can give this boy the one he deserves. Weeks later, Margaret received another letter. This one bore no handwriting, just a symbol. A black river serpent coiled around a scale. Inside was a note on fine parchment, typed in all caps. You took him from us. Now we come for what's ours. Attached was a photo. Daniel. Playing in the backyard. Someone had taken it from inside the fence. The letter didn't just rattle Margaret. It activated something deeper than fear, rage. A rage that had smoldered ever since she pulled the trigger on Leonard in that quiet Boca Raton kitchen. She turned to Eli Parker, her only ally with nothing to lose. The black serpent symbol matched an emblem found in the encrypted folder labeled Black River, contingency on the flash drive Roxanne had given them before she vanished. A deeper investigation revealed its origins. The Black River Syndicate, a secretive financial crime network operating under the guise of international development firms, real estate ventures, and investment startups. It had no official name, no structure, and no known leaders. But what it did have was reach. And Leonard had stolen from them. Millions. It came at 3:41 a.m. A voice distorted through a filter. Calm, clinical. You have what belongs to us. The boy is leverage. Do not involve law enforcement again, or you'll be mourning more than a husband. Margaret didn't respond. She simply hung up, stood from bed, and walked into the nursery. There he was, Daniel. Still safe. Still asleep. Clutching the stuffed bear she'd bought him the day she got custody. She wasn't going to run. Not again. Margaret called in the last favor she had. It came in the form of Judge Henrietta Miles, a retired family court judge who had presided over her custody hearing and believed in her innocence from the beginning. With her help, Margaret got Daniel placed under federal witness protection, a rare move for a child so young, but not unheard of given the threat. Daniel was sent to a secure location with a court-appointed guardian. Margaret agreed to the separation under one condition. She would lead the feds to the money. But what she didn't tell them was this: she already knew where some of it was. Before his death, Leonard had insisted on taking yearly trips to a writer's retreat in Lake Crescent, North Carolina. He would go alone. No phone calls. No visitors. Margaret had never gone with him. After cross-referencing shell companies from Roxanne's flash drive, Eli found a property deed in the mountains registered to Everfield Holdings LLC, a name that appeared repeatedly in Leonard's laundering trail. Margaret and Eli made the trip. Inside the remote cabin they found a hidden safe beneath a loose floorboard, $480,000 in clean non-sequential bills, a burner phone with only one number saved, Viper, and a locked steel briefcase. The briefcase held something that would shake the very foundation of Leonard's betrayal. Inside were birth certificates. 4 of them. One for Daniel. One for the twins Carla had supposedly miscarried 2 years earlier. And 2 more. For children Margaret never knew existed. Her name was Elise Kavanaugh Fisher. According to the documents, Leonard had married her in 1972, a year before he met Margaret. The marriage was never annulled. In the eyes of the law, Margaret's entire marriage was invalid. Leonard had been a bigamist for 46 years. Elise had died of cancer in 2003, but they had 2 sons, now in their 40s. Both had criminal records. And both had ties to shell corporations that funneled funds to the Black River Syndicate. Suddenly, the photo of Daniel wasn't just a threat. It was a signal from Leonard's own bloodline. They weren't just cleaning up their father's mess. They were fighting for what they believed belonged to them. Margaret returned to Florida to find her safe house compromised. Windows smashed. Photos burned. And on the wall, scrawled in red spray paint, "The boy is our legacy." FBI agents moved her to an undisclosed location while they tightened surveillance around Daniel's new guardian. Meanwhile, Eli received an anonymous tip that the eldest Fisher's son, Marcus, had been spotted in Mexico near a Black River-funded resort. Eli went after him. 3 days later he was missing. Only his phone was found, tossed from a hotel balcony. But just before his disappearance, Eli sent Margaret one final encrypted message. The legacy isn't money. It's a code. Hidden inside Daniel's DNA. You were never the target, he was. Margaret demanded Daniel be tested. Not just paternity, but full genome sequencing. The results revealed something shocking. Daniel carried a unique genetic marker tied to a private biotech company previously funded by Leonard's offshore accounts. The project? A proprietary stem cell line with potential for multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical development. Leonard hadn't just fathered a child. He had engineered an asset. And now the Black River Syndicate wanted it back. Daniel wasn't just an heir. He was the key to a medical breakthrough. Margaret stood in the observation room, watching Daniel play through a one-way mirror at the federal facility. Safe. For now. But then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. A single video file. She hit play. It was Eli. Beating. Bleeding. Gagged. Behind him stood Marcus Fisher, her dead husband's firstborn son. And he said just one thing. If you want the boy to live, bring us the briefcase. Alone. Margaret hadn't slept in 36 hours. The briefcase sat on the coffee table of the safe house like a silent bomb. No one, not even the FBI, knew what was truly inside. Not the full picture. All she'd told the agents was that it contained important financial evidence. But now she knew what it really held. The access codes, the biotech contracts, the DNA encryption, the formula that could turn Daniel from a human being into a billion-dollar patent. And Marcus knew it too. The message was clear: trade the case or Daniel dies. Margaret made a decision. She wasn't calling the FBI. She wasn't involving the marshals. She was going alone. But she wasn't going unarmed. Before leaving, she recorded a video confession. Every detail of Leonard's betrayal, the Black River Syndicate, the multiple wives, and the legacy hidden in Daniel's blood. She emailed it to 3 people. Judge Miles, a whistleblower journalist in New York, and the director of the FBI. If anything happened to her or Daniel, the truth would burn its way through every screen in the country. She took the briefcase, the burner phone, and a loaded pistol from the safe. Then she drove. The coordinates Marcus sent led her to an abandoned private airstrip 40 miles outside Ocala, Florida. The sun had just dipped below the horizon. As Margaret's headlights cut through the fog, she saw them. A black SUV. 2 armed men. And Marcus, holding a gun to Eli Parker's head. Eli was bruised, bleeding, but alive. You came, Marcus smirked. Didn't think you had it in you, Mom? Margaret's grip on the briefcase tightened. Where's Daniel? Marcus raised an eyebrow. He's safe. For now. Depends on how smart you are. She took a step forward. You want the briefcase? Let him go. Marcus motioned to the men. One lowered his gun. Eli was shoved forward, coughing violently as he collapsed at Margaret's feet. She handed the briefcase to Marcus. He opened it, flipped through the files, inserted the flash drive into a laptop, then smiled. Thank you, he said. Now you've done what your husband never could. You've made me rich. What Marcus didn't know was that Margaret had swapped the real documents with decoys. The access codes were false. The data encrypted with a virus. The biometric algorithm rigged to self-delete after 5 wrong attempts. And now it was time for the 5th. As Marcus opened the 4th file, Eli whispered, Now. Margaret dove behind the SUV as Eli pulled a small device from his jacket. A jammer synced to detonate the virus in the flash drive. The laptop fried instantly. Sparks flew. Smoke curled. Marcus screamed, "What did you do?" Gunfire erupted. But it wasn't from Margaret. It was from behind Marcus. Federal agents swarmed the scene. Judge Miles had forwarded Margaret's video to the DOJ hours earlier. The FBI had tracked Margaret's vehicle, swarmed the coordinates, and moved in for a tactical takedown. Within seconds, Marcus and his men were disarmed, arrested, and dragged away. Eli was rescued. And Margaret? She was finally free. With the briefcase in federal custody, the FBI launched Operation Riverfall, a multi-agency sting targeting the Black River Syndicate's assets. Over the next 3 months, 14 shell companies were dismantled. 8 political figures were indicted. $62 million in stolen funds were recovered. And more than 20 covert operatives were arrested across 6 countries. Margaret's testimony became the cornerstone of the investigation. She didn't just survive her husband's betrayal. She dismantled the empire he built with her inheritance. 3 months later, Margaret sat in a federal facility in New Mexico. A nurse entered. "They're ready for you." She stepped into a playroom, where a small boy with curly brown hair was stacking blocks. "Daniel?" she whispered. He turned and smiled. "Grandma." She dropped to her knees, arms open wide. For the first time she cried not from pain, but from peace. Later that night, Margaret received a call from a federal agent. They'd been combing through Leonard's offshore messages. One stood out. Sent exactly 3 days before his death. A voice recording. Leonard's voice. "If anything happens to me, don't trust Roxanne." She was never working alone. She was working for them. Margaret froze. Roxanne. The woman who gave her the flash drive. The woman who disappeared. The woman who knew everything. Was she a whistleblower? Or the one who lit the match in the first place? The agent continued, "And there's something else. There's another child." Margaret clutched the phone, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" she asked. "She's alive. A girl. 17 years old. Hidden her whole life. The mother was someone else entirely. The file was buried under a false name. But the DNA confirms it." The agent paused. "And she's been reaching out. She wants to meet you." A text buzzed on Margaret's phone. A known number. A photo. A teenage girl standing in front of a gravestone. It read, "Leonard Delacroix, 1952 to 2023. Underneath, in handwritten script, "He was my father. What was he to you?" Her name was Ava Monroe. 17. Sharp eyes, soft voice. They met in a secure cafe in Santa Fe, under FBI supervision. Margaret stared at the girl across the table. So much like Leonard. The eyes. The bone structure. The subtle arrogance in her posture. But there was something else too, pain. Ava slid a small envelope across the table. "I don't want your money," she said. "I want answers." Inside the envelope was a birth certificate. Father, Leonard Delacroix. Mother, Evelyn Monroe, a name Margaret didn't recognize. Ava continued, "He visited us twice a year. Said he was working. Said he loved me. Then he just stopped showing up." Margaret's heart cracked again. She realized Leonard hadn't just betrayed her. He'd manufactured a life around lies, planting broken families like stepping stones across the decades. With Ava's DNA confirmed, Margaret gained access to Leonard's final hidden vault in the Cayman Islands, tied to an account under Ava's mother's maiden name. Inside the vault was a journal, 2 passports, a single manila envelope marked, "For Margaret, in case of my death." She opened it alone. The letter inside read, Margaret, you were my greatest lie, and my greatest regret. Everything I built was because of your money, your name, your silence. But I never loved you the way you loved me. I couldn't. The child you couldn't give me, I searched for in others, and I found them. 4 of them. Then 5. Then Ava. But none of them ever called me home the way you did. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Which means I lost control. Something I never expected. Forgive me not for what I did, but for what I made you become. Al. Margaret dropped the paper. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat still. And for the first time in her life, she let go of the illusion she had clung to for 46 years. Ava didn't want revenge. She wanted identity. Tell me who he was to you, she asked softly. Margaret answered. He was a master manipulator. A thief of souls. A man who wore masks so long he forgot what his real face looked like. But he was also my husband. My partner. My mistake. Ava nodded. Then asked, can we start over? Margaret looked at her, this teenager who carried her husband's blood but none of his sins, and gave the only answer she could. Yes. 6 months later, Margaret made a public statement. She donated $20 million of the recovered funds to build a national foundation for victims of financial and emotional abuse, particularly those trapped in deceptive marriages and manipulative partnerships. She named it the Delacroix Redemption Fund, not in honor of Leonard, but to reclaim the name he tarnished. Ava became the foundation's youngest board member. Daniel's adoption was finalized. Eli Parker, after months of recovery, began writing a book about the entire case. The title? Love, Lies, and Leonard, the Man Who Fooled Everyone But Her. At the 1-year memorial of Leonard's death, Margaret visited his grave for the first time. She didn't bring flowers. She brought the journal he had hidden in the Cayman vault. She read the final page aloud. One day they'll write stories about me. Maybe they'll call me a monster. Maybe a genius. But they'll never know what it felt like to live 2 lives. One hollow, one full. In the end, the hollow one won. Because I let it. She closed the book, laid it on the headstone, and whispered, No, Leonard. I won. Because I survived you. Margaret was never prosecuted for Leonard's death. The courts ruled it a homicide, yes. But in the end, her cooperation, the depth of his fraud, and the empire she helped take down spoke louder than the bullets she fired. Justice had a different face this time. It wasn't cold or blind. It was precise, human, and poetic. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who bury us deepest. But no matter how long you've lived inside someone else's illusion, you can still choose to wake up. And when you do, the truth, even soaked in blood, can set you free.